Uh, for those of you who are not aware, know very little of David Shoes, I'd just like to share with you the beginnings, and then we'll continue on. David Shoes began in response to my son being killed by another teen with a gun in his hand. After a long time uh, of grief, and realized that I was not able to get out of that space, I really did have to reach out to a mental health therapist who really did help me maneuver this grief process. Uh, After I began to get some relief, I realized that I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one this was happening to. This was happening to mothers over and over and over again, and mothers were having their children killed over and over again. And I felt that I had to do something, and I didn't know exactly what to do. So I joined several different organizations, but that didn't help. And then I realized that because I am an educator, I've been an educator for a very, very, very long time, that if I just needed to talk to the kids. I needed to tell them to, think about who they are and to appreciate themselves. And with a group of very dedicated friends, Choose was born. Our mission is to reduce teen violence through youth engagement, education, and community youth empowerment, education, and community engagement. We give scholarships to young men who live in cities that are challenged with gun violence, and they have decided to continue their education. So for the 4 years that they attend an institution of higher education, such as college, university, or trade school, they will receive this book scholarship. They are also paired with a mentor. We also last year, we sponsored an art contest, which we wanted students to think about what it meant to honor life and to create an art piece using that particular concept. And the young lady did a beautiful job because what she centered on was empathy. Realizing that to empathize with someone else is a way of honoring life. And so that was awesome. And then we have community engagement. And as a result of the pandemic, community engagement has allowed us to stay focused, to stay in touch with the community, stay in touch with people that we have concerns with. We have panelists. We talk about different topics that are very, very near to each and every one of us. This past April, we had a live cast with educators, and it was about the effects of the pandemic on the educational process, the educational success of our students. And through this conversation with principals, teachers from all different grade levels, the topic of mental health kept coming up. And their concern about the mental health of their students was extremely important. And we realized that maybe that's the next thing that we should begin to talk about. And so that's exactly what we decided to do. We decided that we wanted to have a panel of mental health therapists talking about the effects, the possible effects of the pandemic on our students' mental health. I'd like to take this time to introduce our panel to you. Our first is Rhonda Fleming. I'm sorry, Rhonda Johnson. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the name of the school doing something wrong. Please forgive me.
That is no problem. Thank you, Ms. Lane. I'm really happy to be here and happy to be involved with David's Shoes. It's so funny, for a long time early in my life, that was anybody's only reference to the name Rhonda, was the actress Rhonda Fleming. So maybe the spirit will help guide us today or something.
Right.
So
well, you just tell us a little bit about you, your position, where you work, the number of years that you may have been a therapist, share a challenging story about working with youth and a story of success with working with youth, and anything else that you want to share with us.
Okay. Well, I'm an art therapist in private practice in northern New Jersey. I work primarily with children and adolescents, but during this pandemic, there's been a lot of pivoting that a lot of people have done, including myself. So I actually have a few adult clients now. And I'm happily adapting to the new technologies and everything else that the pandemic has allowed us to explore on the positive. We'll talk about some of the other aspects of living through the pandemic in a few minutes with the other panel. What can I tell you about myself? I came to art therapy after a brief career in corporate America, and I found more of a voice, I think, in expressive therapy, and particularly in working with children. And I'm sure that it's what I will continue to do for years to come as I'm able. A particular challenge that I have had recently, I think, is in dealing with perfectionism in children. That continues to be something that I need to focus on in my practice with my clients. And I think a particular success that I feel that I've had is also from this time of the pandemic, where I had to learn how to reimagine art therapy as something that could happen via a platform like this, through the computer, instead of inviting children and teens into a room full of art material and giving them room to explore. I had to figure out how to engage their imaginations through the computer. Now, that was very challenging, but it can be done.
Yes, and I think one thing, there are a lot of negatives. Of course, there was a lot of negatives about the pandemic, but I think some positives also came about because we did have to stretch ourselves.
Yes.
We had to do things that we had no idea we knew how to do.
Absolutely.
And I think that's fantastic.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I agree.
Our next therapist is Miss Kiana Gonzalez.
Hello.
Would you just share information concerning yourself? Welcome.
Thank you. Sure. My name is Kiana. I'm a licensed associate counselor in New Jersey. I also work mainly out of North Jersey. I've been in the mental health field for 8 years, also working mostly with children and adolescents. I think in terms of challenges and successes, I kind of think of it in all in one. For me, one of the biggest challenges in doing therapy was trying to do group therapy with 10 to 12-year-olds, anywhere from 8 to 10 of them in the room at the same time. And that intimidated me when I started. I was nervous about it. But then getting to that point where we had group cohesion and they could give each other feedback and they could support each other, that felt like a success. That felt like a win.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. That does sound very awesome. And a lot of times, that's where the greatest success comes from. When we have something so challenging that we have to go beyond ourselves to try to, to be successful with it. Thank you. And our next panelist is Ms. Jessica Elliott. Okay.
Hi, everybody. Hi. My name is Jessica. I am also an LAC, so I am a clinician in mostly working out of North Jersey, but this year I was also working in South Bronx. I have experience working with children, teenagers, and young adults. I'm also a doctoral student in Seton Hall's PhD program. I've been a therapist for the past 5 years. A challenge that I had, particularly with this year, was, learning how to engage children, especially the younger children, with teletherapy, and having to really take my skills and learning how to use that across Zoom and how to keep them engaged and also keep them motivated. But on the flip side, the success was when they really bought into it and seeing them make the progress via teletherapy. That was really amazing to see that. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And again, I think the major success comes from situations that begin very, very difficult. But we might not know what the answer is, and we have to work through it in order to find out. Thank you so very much to each and every one of you. We'll begin with the questioning now. Many students have only attended school through some virtual platform for about a year now, more than a year. Many students still have not attended school in person. Some parents have chosen to continue virtual learning until September. What are some of the side effects mentally and emotionally should educators prepare based on age and grade level when they return? What are some of the things that educators should prepare for? Any one of you can start the ball rolling.
Well, I have a thought in general about all of us and the aftermath of the pandemic, or the winding down. I don't think we can say that we're in the after yet. I think that we have to take it slow and be very patient with ourselves and each other, because there isn't anyone, perhaps on the planet, who hasn't been affected in some way. And that goes from people who have lost family members or people in their close circle, to people who have just been kind of inconvenienced and adapted new habits over time. So I don't know that there's like a one thing to look out for, or even a thing per age group, but to let us all be individuals and kind of digest what has happened is a good starting point.
Right.
What do you ladies think?
Yeah, I agree. I think some of the things I was thinking about with that question is like that last piece you said about digesting it, like maybe creating a space in school that like we can talk about this. We can spend 10 to 15 minutes in the morning just checking in, right? How's everyone doing? What's it like getting back to coming to school? I think the biggest thing I've heard, even as I've been working with kids who are returning on hybrid schedule or part of the day in school in person, is that it's really overstimulating. They're used to sitting at home, you know, in their most comfortable clothes with mom or dad or caregiver right there. And being in a school is like, well, wait, I'm around a lot of kids. There's a lot of sounds and things happening. And that's from the youngest to the oldest, I've heard that it's just, it can be overwhelming to be back in that setting.
As what was, interesting to me was, I think I told you guys I was in California this past week, just came back this morning. And my grandnephew, I saw him sitting in the middle of the living room with his laptop or whatever you would call it, and him talking back and forth. And I forgot what was going on, so I got a little loud, and everybody had to shut me because he was in school. But it was something, of course, something I'd never seen before. And it was just odd to see this child in isolation in that living room by himself with this laptop in front of him, doing the work he had to do. And he did a very good job. Because their school ended Thursday. And so he did a very good job. He got all of these awards and everything else. But I could see the isolation. Just him sitting there in that living room with that laptop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I was reading an article about our collective adjustment after the pandemic a couple of months ago, and I can't quote the person and give him credit because I can't remember, but he said that our personalities are like sand dunes. And you know how sand dunes, they're always sand dunes, but they shift over time with the winds and they get moved. And and shifted ever so slightly. And the suggestion was to think of our personalities during the pandemic in that way, that we were sort of buffeted and blown around by all kinds of different effects, the fear, the uncertainty, the changes in our habits. And we won't be in the same place again where we were when it started. We'll still be ourselves, but we'll be somewhat shifted. And and again, I would ask people to just understand that, about yourself first, but then also about your children and your students, and allow them to express what those shifts have been like.
I think you brought up a very good concept. I think you're 100% right. We as educators, I'm not in the classroom anymore, retired, but as educators, we need to look at, or as people, as adults, we need to look and see how this has affected us. And and we need to be patient with ourselves, but we need to be aware that it has affected us, and that we can't just pick up and keep on moving because of this package we have on our shoulders. And if we can understand that about ourselves, I think that then maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to be more sympathetic, more understanding, more patient as our children come back to the classroom. And I love what you said, Kiana, about having a space for them, creating a space for them to just to cool down, just to calm down and say, okay, this is something different. I have to adjust to this, so they can move forward. I think there is a new normal. I don't think the old normal is going to work. And we have to be very conscious about that. And we can't force that old normal on children, So, and unfortunately, some students' home environment are not emotionally healthy. In-person schooling allows students to escape some of the trauma. Because of COVID, some students have been denied that escape, and as a result, they have returned to school either extremely introverted or more physically violent, and in some places in the middle. What can teachers and schools do to determine the problem and seek help? What can we do? What can educators do?
I like what Kiana mentioned before about, even if it's in the beginning of the day, allowing the students to have that space to, if they want to talk, that they would be able to have that opportunity. But I also think it would be a good idea for educators and for schools to also model that for them, because for some children, they may not know how to express their feelings. So if the teacher is able to be a bit vulnerable and say, this was really difficult for me, I had a hard time with this as well. So then the children know that it's okay to talk about their emotions and to talk about how the pandemic has affected them, but also how to talk about their emotions.
I think that's such a good point for the adults to model what we want the children to do and to not rush. I was thinking earlier while you were talking about the difference between being watched, which when we are stressed, we tend to watch our children. So the difference between being watched and being seen is so key, and I think so important in order to invite them to express themselves, to give them the eye contact, to let them see our vulnerability, but not to be watching them for a sign that they're doing something wrong. As a parent, I recognize there are times to be watchful, but don't let that be our habit, as the adults in these kids' lives, whether we're parents, teachers, relatives, neighbors, but to actually look them in the eye and say, how are you? And listen to what they have to say. Even the ones who might be a little belligerent or a little acting out and getting on your nerves, that's often a signal from them that all is not well. And so to, and I realize as I'm saying it, how hard it is, well, especially if your child is in school at home and you're doing that 24/7 schedule together. But to be kind to yourself so that you can be kind to them and just listen to what they have to say.
Do you see this response? I wonder if the teacher could spend a few minutes with each student over the first few days of school. Ask and explore in person, one-on-one, what their home learning experience was like. What do you think about that? I think that's a wonderful idea.
Definitely. I think that can be such a crucial check-in just for the teacher to even have any understanding, right? The online platform you see what's in the square, right? And the kids have a whole room, a whole house, apartment, something surrounding them that the teacher has no idea what's on the other side of that laptop, right? So that I think that could be so helpful in validating the student, but also giving the teacher a clue at like, where are we starting? Where are we starting from with this?
Absolutely. And I think it just gives confidence to students that somebody cares, that they're more than this machine, that we're supposed to put information in and get information out. I honestly think it really respects students. Yes, absolutely. And I think this goes with what we've been saying. What kind of systems should be in place when students return and while they're returning? Because some are returning now, some students will be returning in September. What kind of system should be in place to make sure that we are connecting with students, that we are respecting where they are, not only academically, but mentally and emotionally as well?
It strikes me, as we're just talking about teachers sitting down for a few minutes with all their students, that the modeling again comes into play, that this also needs to be happening for the teachers, because they have really been through it. Next to healthcare professionals, or right up there with healthcare professionals, the teachers have really ridden the front of the wave of this pandemic, and they have been asked to do so many things simultaneously. For them to be able to have that chill out time and that meeting time and that discussion of what has this been like for you. For the schools, school administrators, principals, for the school boards to recognize these things are needed for the teachers, this time and this space, for them to check in with each other so that they can then model that and respond to the kids' needs in that fashion. Let's not ask them to carry all the weight of taking care of the kids and not being able to take care of themselves.
Right. So, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that when something like that happens, that really, I feel good about that, because it tells me if we can do that, I'd like to see it done, that maybe we're making some really positive changes in the whole school system. How we not only react to students, but how we react to each other, and what are the values that we are trying to pass on to our children, and whatever values we are trying to teach them. And you're 100% right, Rhonda, that it has to be modeled. It has to come from someplace. Children have to see it being done. They have to see it being done. I think when they see it being done, then that's when we begin to create a culture, and creating that culture allows students to feel safe. And I certainly do believe that it will impact their academic learning, and we can have some kids who feel really good inside. And when that happens, I think that, the educational system has really done something wonderful.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah. Kind of going off what you said, Ms. Rhonda, I wanted to just share a tool that I've learned as a trauma-informed practice that I think would really be able to be implemented, like you were saying, on these different levels, like that the teacher and the school staff could do it, but then it could be done in classrooms too. And it's a version of like that check-in. Anyone who ever sat in my group, we do an energy check, and that's how we start. And it's a really simple. It's like you just say, is your energy high, medium, or low? And are you feeling comfortable or uncomfortable? Ms. Rhonda, Rhonda knows. She's like, she's been in my groups. But it gives you an insight too, right? Like, and adults can do it, and we can say my energy is low. I only have had half my cup of coffee, so I'm working through the second half. I'm working on getting to medium. And it gives a check-in for the school, right? So you know that the teacher next to you is on low, feeling uncomfortable, maybe stuff is going on at home. Maybe you can check in with her as her coworker, and it gives you a classroom feel too of like, okay, so half of my classroom has low energy. Let's start the day in a certain way to meet that need. Or they have high energy. Let's start with the meditation and bring the energy down, right?
Right. You make me want to go back in the classroom. Yeah. After all of these years, because those are the times that it's really exciting when you look at the class and say, "Oh my God, what am I going to do today?" Because what I thought was going to happen is not going to work. And on a dime, you have to change and move because of where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I was also thinking, every school is different, but I was thinking about if teachers could like advocate for, the social workers or the school psychologists that are in the school to even have like quick group, like almost workshop type of sessions with the students, and helping again, like talk about emotions, talking about, how this has affected them, talking about like what are coping skills, what are ways that we can express our emotions in a healthy way. And there are different things that we can do for different ages. So even for like younger kids, reading a book about talking about your emotions, or for older kids, maybe having like a sit down, like kind of circle type of group, and having it almost be like a pseudo group therapy session. If we can utilize and tap into that. Yeah.
So all this talk about talk is reminding me that I'm an expressive therapist, and that there are other ways to express yourself besides talk. And so I want to put in a good word for art therapy. And although I'm not trained as a music or drama therapist or a dance therapist, I also say that there are so many ways to express yourself that don't involve articulating your feelings. And this is therapeutic. This is also about what kinds of ways we interact with our families when we're home together. To do something creative together is a really wonderful thing that can yield dividends that you can't possibly even anticipate before you start. If you're cooking with your kids, if you decide to take all those Amazon boxes and make a train or a boat or a rocket with your kids, all you need is the boxes and the masking tape. If you close your eyes and scribble together and talk about what it looks like, like the game of what do the clouds look like up in the sky. All those things and more, even telling stories, telling family stories, going through old photo albums can be times to spark the imagination and allow questions and expression to come forth, which is just so important for all of us as a way of bonding with each other and understanding each other. So, you wouldn't believe that I could do successful art therapy through the computer, but I just want to tell you about one time last summer when I was faced with 3 8-year-olds, one of whom was in a closet with no materials, one of whom was in a car on the way to an appointment, and the other of whom selectively decided not to speak. And we had to do art therapy. Nobody had any art materials, and all kinds of other distractions were happening. So I said, okay, everybody, I'm going to give you 8 seconds. And I counted it out. I said, I want you to grab an item, anything that's close to you. If you pull a sock off your foot, that's fine. If it's just a pencil or a ball of fuzz off the rug, doesn't matter. Everybody found something. I said, okay, This now has magical powers. So you decide, what are the magic powers and what are you going to do with this item? And I got to tell you, through the grace of the art therapy gods, that lasted us 40 minutes. And they brought their A game. I mean, we had magic shoes that would take us to Italy. We had a magic hat that could broadcast your thoughts. We had a magic, I think it was a magic juice pouch. And even the other staff members who were on the group with me, they had a magical tie, and there was a magic pen that could write your thoughts so that people could understand them. So I'm saying, give people an opportunity to engage their imaginations. And that's part of this healing process too. Not only that you can articulate, I feel bad, I feel good, but that sometimes you don't have a name for it. So doing something creative can really help get what is inside, outside. And it's very helpful.
And I think that
commercial.
With kids, I can see that working so well. You know, once you give them the freedom and the permission to explore, then it's just absolutely awesome. And you get a chance to see their thinking. You see how their thinking level and how critically they can and truly think. And yes, I'm an English teacher, so I believe in the writing and the reading and all of that. But there's so much value in what you just said, because just like you said, everybody doesn't want to do that, and so students should be able to express themselves, and we should allow self-expression as in many ways as possible.
Yeah, it could make pancakes. You know, that's how all those Mickey Mouse pancakes started. Creativity.
Right. Wow. Do you think, would it be necessary for younger students, for example, kindergartners and first graders, to be socialized again to be successful? Do you think that they need to be socialized again after being away for so long? And if so, then how do we do it?
I think they might need a refresher. That's kind of how I was thinking about it. I don't think they will be, from what I have seen, starting from zero, but I think they'll probably need additional support. I've seen a lot of, it's helpful to draw parallels for them. Like, hey, you know how when you had to sit with your computer, like that's how you have to sit in your chair when you go to school, right? So that it's like, I do know how to sit, right? I know how to do that part. I just need to know that this is how it goes in this setting, right? Kindergarten, first grade, sometimes they're going into completely new settings. So I think incorporating, and I think Miss Rhonda said it. Rhonda said it. Perhaps I worked with Rhonda, so in front of the kids, I always call her Miss Rhonda, but I'm working on just calling her Rhonda. Having the grace with them that they might not be great at it. They might, even if you have worked with them or as a parent are like, no, my kid knew how to do this, 2 school years ago. They might have to work on it a little bit, practice, and get back into the swing of things. Doesn't mean you're starting from zero. I think that can feel discouraging to say, like, we have to do this again. But I think just is going to take maybe some time to get back to where we were.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of like polishing up, because everybody's routines were interrupted. And a lot of what happens in school is routines, which get reinforced year to year. And they're accustomed to being with their friends in a certain way. And none of that has been happening. So there's going to be maybe anxiety. There's going to be excitement, about being back together, all these expectations. And that's a lot for little bodies and minds to process. And not to mention adolescents as well. I mean, all of us, even think of it, even older people going back into the office after a year of not going into the office. are not going to be comfortable with like elevator etiquette.
Right.
Condition now that when somebody sneezes or coughs, we're like, oh my God, what's happening? We have to bring it back down and get accustomed to those things again. And so children have to kind of get, ease back into it as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It reminds me, like, I started back going to church in person. And at first, I made sure I sat, socially distant from everybody,
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. You have to. It takes time for even me as an adult to get back to, and I don't know if we will get back to totally that thing that we called normal a year ago, but at least at ease. I'll get back to feeling a little bit more at ease in the presence of a lot of people, because I am not there yet. I know for sure. I don't mind being, but in the presence of a lot of people. But I want the space between us. I'm not ready to sit very, very, very close to somebody that I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I guess the kids we have to recognize that with the kids as well. One person, I wonder if it's also helped to start them off with an automatic hybrid schedule. We might see more of separation anxiety being that they've been home for a year, or even if this is their first experience with in-person schooling. Starting, in other words, easing them into full school day in-person experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know from a mental health, sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead. Right, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, from a mental health perspective, that's how we treat anxiety, right? Is the gradual exposure to something that is anxiety producing. So I know that I think that might be a great solution, especially if that separation anxiety or even anxiety about being around people, right? About illness. I've seen that in kids that is a pretty direct result. I work with families on, you should start as soon as you're noticing this, start working on, okay, so we're going to practice driving to the school and see what that's like. We're going to practice standing in front of the school, right? If the teacher is there or even open to it, can you come to the classroom and see what that's like, right? So that there is a gradual, and of course, with the number of students who are probably experiencing it, that might be overwhelming for the parents, for the teachers to make themselves available. So I think an automatic hybrid might be a good start to give everyone a chance to adjust slowly to it.
Right, right. And I like what you say about, having parents be a part of this as well, allowing them just to go to school, just to stand outside the school for a minute to see how, checking on their well-being. And I think so parents can do a lot as well. We don't want to overburden them, because I know they have been burdened, no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But there are certain things parents can do as well.
Should we talk a little bit about the fact that a lot of people don't have any choice in how their kids go back to school? Because there's the ideal that we would like to see as clinicians, as parents, and certainly teachers have an opinion. But sometimes the mayor decides, or whoever decides what's about to happen, and then you have to deal with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know who has that power to say this is what we need to do. But I think that, we should have some kind of an idea of what could happen, what might be the best way to do this, And unfortunately, in many instances, I think that there are people who make decisions for other people. And I'm concerned about what is their background, what is their background and their ability to make that decision for someone else. But you're 100% right. Sometimes we just have to take it. But then I think once we say, okay, this is what has to happen, then we need to look at it and say, okay, how could I make this the best choice possible. That might be some extra thing because the mayor or because the superintendent said this is the way it's going to happen. Then I think that maybe you need to look and say, okay, then how can I make this work? You know, knowing my child, or knowing my school, or knowing my class, how can I truly make this work? So it might look different from one person to the other.
Yeah. And in regards to that, I think that's a really challenging position to be put in as a parent or as an educator, right? That choices about what affect your daily life are being made by people who maybe are not aware of what that daily life looks like, or, you know, individual circumstances.
Right.
And I think the first step as adults in kids' lives is checking in with yourself. Right? Like, as a parent, is my anxiety through the roof thinking about my kid being in school all day come September, right? And not that you have to not have that feeling, but to be aware of it. Like, okay, I'm anxious about this, so let me take care of myself. And your kid might also be anxious, but the more anxious you are, your kid will notice that. Your child will notice that. Yeah.
Even though the pandemic is waning, we hope, it still very presents us with continuous challenges in terms of how to best manage our lives. And everybody is so individual. You know, some children have really thrived during this time because the social anxiety they felt about going into the school building they haven't had to deal with. And some kids at the other end of that continuum have been so sort of adrift without their groups of friends and without that contact every day with their friends that they can barely stand it anymore. And it makes it hard to make blanket recommendations like, you know, all seventh graders should do X, Y, or Z. But parents know their kids and teachers know their kids. So, you know, the check-in, I guess it continues to come back to taking care of yourself as the adult, and then, you know, modeling that, checking in with how you're feeling for the kids that you're involved with.
Right. I learned this year that there is such a thing called social emotional learning. And I know it's over many districts that teachers have to do something related to that. There are even curriculums that you can use, but it's up to I guess right now from what I've seen, it's basically up to like the school administrator or maybe the district as to how it would be implemented. But many school districts are implementing this thing called social emotional learning. And I think that's good, but I think it's good if we create the culture. Because I honestly think that I can't. Well, I think there are times in which you can't do 30 minutes of talking about a particular feeling or whatever, but you just don't drop it and go on to something else. You know, I think it has to be incorporated into what we as a class do. You know, and how we as a class interact with each other. The good thing is, I think that step one is there is such a thing called social emotional learning. That's step one, and I think that has happened. I'm just hoping that school systems and teachers and everybody involved really, and I know because I've been a teacher too, and every time you turn around, somebody's telling you this is the new thing to do. So we have to do this. And you have to do that, and you have to do that, and you've got this pile of things you have to do. But realize that really that true education comes when we touch the whole kid, when we try to impact the whole kid, not just the academic part, not just the brain part, but the whole kid, the child, his emotional self, his social self, all of that has to be impacted. And I think it can be done And it doesn't have to be something extra, but we have to learn how to, and it may, some people may have to learn how to integrate it, within classroom.
Yeah, I'm glad it's something that's being emphasized. I think it's also something that the best teachers do already, with just sort of recognizing their students as people,
Right.
and being able to see every child as a student, no matter how they're dressed or what color their skin is, or, kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are, but seeing everyone as a student is
Right.
part of the social and emotional context for
Right.
education.
Absolutely. Some older students, especially boys, either don't have the verbal skills or choose not to verbalize their difficulties. Therefore, some of them end up verbalizing their needs by physical violence. How do we determine their needs to help them become successful? Any comments?
It's a big question. Yeah. I know Jessica and Kiana both have experience with this, so ideas?
Do you want to go, Jessica? I feel like I've been talking too much.
No, you've been talking fine, but yeah, I can I guess I kick it off. I feel like I'm like a broken record. I really think that, modeling this again, because I know like first part of the question was like they don't know how to verbalize, and I agree, because I think even like I look at like a lot of the work that I've done and the families that I've worked with, and especially in Black and Brown communities, the idea of talking about our feelings, sometimes it's taboo, right? So if educators or school staff are able to, one, model that for them, but also provide them that psychoeducation about like it's normal to feel emotions, but what we need to do with those emotions is how can we, in a healthy, age appropriate way, how can we cope with that? How do we get that out? And I think having those like explicit conversations and also modeling that for them is really important for our students.
Yeah, I agree. I think modeling it and having it, I think Ms. Elaine, you were saying, building it into the culture of the classroom, that if we have the culture that we label our feelings, some of my favorite moments, I think, working in groups have been when the kids in the group can give each other the feedback either in the moment or like the next day. And the feedback is like, I know I was really annoying you, but you stood up and you yelled and you did this and that wasn't the right way to deal with being angry. And I was like, oh my gosh, people are listening. But the kids hear it so much more clearly when their peers are giving them the feedback. Hey, I recognize this was going on with you. And if they can do that for themselves, and usually I think most of the time I saw that the kids could tolerate that too, right? Even if that was literally the person they were yelling at the day before, or that they were becoming aggressive with the day before, when we give it a structure and it's like, well, we know every Monday and Wednesday we do these feedback sessions. So you knew you were going to get feedback when you did that on Tuesday, and Wednesday we were going to sit down and give feedback, right? They're not being aggressive towards you because they're giving you feedback, right? But I think it's building that structure into the conversation so that it's not like I'm criticizing you. It's not like I'm making fun of you because you got angry yesterday or because your anger was explosive yesterday. But I'm really recognizing, hey, I've had to work on yelling when I'm angry. So right. I'm pointing out that you did this, and maybe I'll give you some advice on what I've done to keep myself from yelling when I'm angry or being aggressive when I'm angry.
Wow. That sounds fantastic. That sounds real. I mean, to have a class to go through that, do that kind of a thing, to put that structure in a classroom would be awesome. I honestly do. And I think it will increase the health of that class. You know, I honestly and truly do. Yes. Is there anything else that you would like to bring forth?
I want to put in another plug for art therapy as a way of exploring the power of the group in the adolescent boy category, especially. There's often the roots of their discontent have to do with feeling rejected or feeling disrespected. And they really take feedback from peers amazingly well, especially in art therapy if you give them something to do, either working on the same thing separately or working on the same thing together. It gives them an opportunity to interact in a positive way and to either symbolically or verbally give each other feedback and discharge some of that negative energy into something productive that they can also then get positive feedback for. And when they get that positive feedback, then that starts to build more self-esteem and more positive feelings and more social bonding with their peers, which is often the beginning of, when you feel like your peers don't respect you, when you feel like you're not part of the group, there's a lot of acting out that comes out of those kinds of feelings.
Yeah.
So to knit them into a group behind a common purpose, and it does not have to be fancy, but I've had positive experiences with boys, boys with glue guns and a big stack of wood, will build a fort, or, Kiana and Jessica have both seen many a cardboard town spring up in the middle of my table, just with the glue gun or masking tape and a ton of recyclables. But there's something about the common effort that it's like Stone Soup, that children's story where the soldiers march into town and they had 3 stones and an iron pot. And before they knew it, they had all the villagers bringing carrots and cabbages and potatoes and everything to add to it. Well, you put a pile of recyclables in the middle of the table and tell them you got 45 minutes, you can turn this into whatever you want. And, you get rockets, you get weapons, you get houses, you get high rises, animals, and you get people united telling a story around a common purpose. And it sounds like nothing, but let me tell you, you see people who are coming into the room agitated and angry and irritable, and they leave, maybe half an inch taller and feeling like they accomplished something important, which they did. And you can't always put a name to exactly what that thing is, but you can tell it's been important to them.
Right.
Yeah, and this is a good time for giving all people, not just adolescent boys, all of us, an opportunity to channel that agitation and feelings of irritability or uncertainty into something positive. That allows us to express ourselves.
Looking back at this past year, not only COVID, but the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and everything else, and seeing these little kids, 5 and 6 year old, talking, letting their voices be heard. And it made me realize, I think this is the time now where that's come, that we can't just look at children and say, like you do as I say do, I'm going to tell you what to do and then you're going to do it. Children have voices as well. And I don't care how old they are, they have a voice. And I don't care how they decide to articulate it. They may be able to articulate it through words, but they also may be able to articulate it through so many other things. And I think all of these avenues should be open to them. I think that we should, invite the voices of our kids, young people. They have them, and I think that if we allow them to somehow let it be known what they're feeling in whatever way possible, I don't know. I just think that we would be trying to grow more mature, more healthier kids than, hope in the past. You know? So, absolutely. Kiana, was it you who said, you brought up something, I can't even remember what it was, that you said that we might want to talk about?
Yes. I had someone kind of ask me the question around, a parent asked a question around how to moderate or help kids deal with, I guess, the fact that, especially going to school, they might get mixed messages. I mean, I'm thinking even now, you just mentioned like the Black Lives Matter movement. Kids might get mixed messages about a lot of things at school, right? From Black Lives Matter to COVID. Different families have very different perspectives on some of these things. And that parent's concern was like, how do I deal with my kid not feeling overwhelmed by getting all this information, sometimes conflicting information, at a really young age?
Any comments from anybody else?
I think those things come up if you check in.
When you were talking to me, were you? I think I have a little bit of a lag. Did you want to go and then I'll go after?
I just snuck mine in. I said, I don't even remember what I said. Go ahead, Jessica.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I was going to say, when I was listening to Kiana talk, I was thinking about a client that I had, and this was at the very beginning of the Black Lives Matter protest, and a parent asked me, how do I talk about this with him? And I think it's important that you have those conversations and you don't just let the child get these messages from outside sources, and allow the child to know that if they have questions, they can come to you, and try to find age appropriate sources. So I know that this was like a younger youth. So CNN had this program with Sesame Street, and they were talking about what is racism, what is discrimination, what is prejudice. And she was able to watch it with him. And if he had questions, she was there and she was able to answer the questions. So it wasn't this bubble of uncertainty and he didn't know what was happening, but he's watching the news maybe a little bit or seeing bits and pieces. He felt comfortable enough to be able to go to somebody and ask what was happening. And I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Rhonda,
kind of the line.
You started to say something, Rhonda?
I think Jessica said a mouthful, and I like what she said. That's what I'm saying.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're 100% right. I don't think we should dodge it. We should be as open as possible with the kids, age appropriately, and I think that creates even a bonding experience with parents and children when you're able to talk about such large concepts with them. So it's like you're hitting two birds with one stone. I'd like to take this time to thank each and every one of you. I think this has been a very engaging conversation. I think that some people got something from this. From one of the clips that I saw, people really enjoyed it. I certainly appreciate what you've done, and I'm hoping that others will even people who did not see it today can go on YouTube and see it and think. There have been quite a bit of information that has allowed people to say, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do this. There have been enough suggestions. Chances are the parents won't say anything wrong. The modeling and openness does it, absolutely. I thank each and every one of you so very much. You've been a benefit not only to me or to David Schultz, but you've been a benefit to the community. And I really, truly appreciate that. I might be calling on you again if something comes up. And I thank you. I thank you for saying yes. And I thank you for the way you said yes, it wasn't pull, I didn't have to pull you. You were so gracious and so open, and I really thank you so very much. Somebody said, "What a great conversation." Yes, yes. This is my sister here, who I've spent the last week with. But thank you so very much. I also want to plug in a commercial on July the 12th. We're having a grab and go luncheon. This is for our scholarship. Like I said, this year we'll be giving 10 $650 scholarships, $650 scholarship to 10 youth. You see the donate at the bottom. I'm asking you, if you can donate, please donate. If you would like to have a grab and go luncheon, message me on from Facebook, and I will give you all of the information as to how we can do it. It's the grab and go because we don't want to get everybody in a closed place. We're still trying to work towards that. And the program will be on Zoom, and I will give you the link if that's what you decide to do. I'm asking you to think about us. We honestly and truly want to have an impact on the lives of our kids. We don't want to see kids hurt anymore. And even though I know that it's totally impossible for me to keep that from happening, but all I know is I have to do my best. I have to do my best to curtail some of the violence in our community. Okay? So thank you. Great job,
It's
everybody.
really a pleasure and an honor. And I really admire the way that you turned such an awful circumstance into a positive memorial to your son. And you really are an inspiration to me. So
Thank you. Thank you.